Hello and welcome to the Old Garage number 29. I'm Wild Bill and we've got a few questions, got some silliness, and of course a cool shout out, so let's just get on with it. Now the first few questions I have are from the episode on commercial vehicles, the last special before the one from this last Saturday. And the first one is from Abigail Lewis, and she asks, when did government start requiring that drivers of taxis, trucks, etc. have a commercial license? This is actually a pretty cool question, and the answer is a bit surprising because it actually dates back to the 17th century. And if you are familiar at all with insurance, and I'm going to just give you a brief because I may just make a whole episode or even special about this, but in the early age of sail you had a number of merchant fleets and sailors and ship owners that wanted to be able to insure their ships and their cargoes, and it was in the late 17th century and the 18th century that this started happening. Now the companies insuring these ships and vessels, they wanted to make certain that there was at least some assurance that they're not going to be taken advantage of, that this is legitimate, that there's not going to be piracy or barratry happening as a result of it. And so they began to require that if some ship owner, and sometimes it was the owner and the captain of the same person, but if the ship owner wanted to insure it, he would have to prove that whoever was captaining that ship was qualified, capable, and experienced enough to do so professionally. And this is where you started having different governments, different national governments, you know, whether it was the United States, well, they didn't exist yet, but whether it's England, France, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, Spain, Portugal, wherever, that there be some sort of captaincy examination and certification for merchant shipping. And this legislation led to licensing or commissioning in that regard, you know, from the private side of things. And this continued on through to the Industrial Revolution and into the locomotive industry. As locomotives, you know, were basically going across, you know, their various countries with people and cargo or even both, and they wanted to make sure that the engineers were licensed to do so. And, you know, because they're carrying, what they're carrying is not theirs. Okay, they're carrying passengers and cargo, and when you're doing that, you are taking responsibility for someone else's property. And this is, of course, what drove the insurance and then drove the licensing to do that. So the idea of a commercial license was already well in place by the mid-19th century, you know, long before there were ever cars. And so when people started using them commercially, be they for taxis or, you know, for cargo trucks and such, commercial licenses happened almost simultaneously with just your standard private licenses. And, you know, it just depends on which country that, you know, you're from, whether, you know, it happened in the 1890s or the 1900s, but it was right around that time. When cars started being used commercially, when trucks started being used commercially, there was already an apparatus in place to deal with that, and it was just carried over from those other industries. So, great question, and like I said, I might just dive into that one. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to. Okay, next question, again, same episode, was from Mark Jerde, I believe. Hope I said that right. And he said that, I heard or read that the USA in World War I forced truck makers to common operator controls, so soldiers could drive any truck. Is this true? If so, were controls like this before World War I? Did any steering wheels guide opposite today's convention? You know, okay, fair question, and it's really kind of weird how that came down, because the governments, when, you know, the United States government in particular, this is what I was asking about, when they issue an order for a military object to be made, you know, whether it's you know, an aircraft, a car, a truck, a gun, a can of beans, I mean, whatever. What they do is they issue out basically bids for it and say, okay, here's what we want you to build, here's the design we've come up with, or at least what they want it to do. Okay, and then all of these various companies will submit their bids and their designs and such, and then the U.S. government and the brass will go, okay, I like that one best, so you win the contract. And then what happens a lot of the time is that the company that wins the contract will hire other companies to help them build the contract because it may be too big for them to do on their own. And this is very, very common in the American military and others around the world. And so when you get to the specifications for motor vehicles right prior to World War I for military use in the Army of the U.S. and even the Navy for that matter, they had a very specific set of instructions. We wanted to have this much, this size engine. We wanted to have at least this much horsepower. We needed to be able to go at least this fast. We needed to be able to carry at least this much cargo. We need to have the steering wheel on the left side or right side. We need to have it being shifted from the floor. Yeah, all these little details will come out in the process of government contract bidding. And any of you who are familiar with that or are watching this, go ahead in the comments. You can talk about some of your stories with that. But the thing is that when you have, you know, a large contract won, and I'm not going to go into who exactly what happened because I haven't really started talking about World War I too much yet, so probably it's going to be another 8 to 12 months before I start really diving into this part of the history of the automobile. But it really wasn't that the government said, okay, everybody make trucks this way. It was that the government said, okay, I want a truck this way, who's going to do it? And then there were so many of them that had to be built that everybody just did it the same way through that same contract. It wasn't mandated specifically by the U.S. Army, but it did kind of just pan out that way. Now, there was the second part of this question here. Okay, what were controls like before World War I? All over the place. You know, there was no standardization because there was, prior to World War I, there was no Department of Transportation. There was no, specific regulations on how a car should be built, to be legal on the road, other than they can get there and move. So, that happened after the war. But before the war, it was, you want something that's steered with your feet. You want the gears on the outside. You have to reach out, with no doors and stuff. I mean, it was all over the place. Even tiller steering was still used in some cases, even as late as 1915. But anyway, there you go. All right, next question again from same episode. And the question is from George W. Newman, and he asked, since Uber and DoorDash and other service drivers usually use a personal vehicle on the clock, but seem to use the same vehicle off the clock, does this vehicle become a commercial vehicle when it and the driver are on the clock and stop being a commercial vehicle when the driver and vehicle go off the clock? Well, that really depends on the local legislation. Now, here's the thing is that you have to, what really makes an Uber driver a commercial vehicle is really the definition of the terms of who's being driven. Okay, are you driving a passenger or are you driving a guest? And these are legal terms. You can look them up in Bouvier's Law Dictionary, Black's Law Dictionary. These are where these terms come from. But if you are being paid to transport somebody, the person that you are transporting is legally a passenger. And therefore, you are being paid for that transport. They are a passenger, and therefore you need to be insured for passage, which is being a commercial vehicle. In fact, I addressed that a bit in a previous question. Whereas if you are not on the clock, if you are not transporting, say you have your wife and kids or your best friend and you're going to the Taco Bell or something, but you're not being paid for, now that person who is your passenger is now your guest and not your passenger, legally. I mean, yeah, in one sense they're your passenger, but as far as if you go to the actual law dictionary in the situation, they're a guest. And so therefore you are not doing it commercially. Okay, whereas if they're a passenger, you are doing it commercially. Now, that's just the generic, the standard law definitions that you're going to find legislated one way or another throughout, the United States, and for that matter, most of the English-speaking world. But under those definitions, an Uber driver vehicle is only a commercial vehicle when he's operating it that way, or she's operating it that way. Whereas once they're off the clock, or even if you're a taxi driver, and you're off the clock and you want to use your taxi to go get some groceries, you're not being a commercial vehicle at that time. How that's handled is really done, at least in the U.S., state by state. And sometimes even county by county. There are some states that will say, well, no, you're going to have a special license for that. Others that say, no, you don't, because you're not doing it consistent. But that's the real definition of the difference between the two. Okay. Now this next question is from the Citroen episode, and for Andre Citroen, and it was from Zippy Destrange, and he asked, Citroen, did he make the lemon? Well, I think I know what you're asking, and I think I already addressed it once at another, the old garage, real early on. But calling a car a lemon, meaning that the car just constantly breaks and it's just nothing but trouble, does actually have a connection with Citroen, and it's a very American term. I mean, it's left America and spread elsewhere in the world, but started in the U.S. 50s and 60s when Citroen was first starting to actually import their cars into the United States. And the thing is that Citroen cars in the 50s, 60s, and 70s were amongst the most technologically advanced in the world. I mean, these were, their suspensions, their electronics, their the way their engines, were configured and such. They were revolutionary, and when they started trying to sell these cars in the United States, the problem is that American mechanics could not figure these things out. It wasn't like working on a Mustang. Okay, I can handle a 289. What the heck is this thing? And so there really wasn't the knowledge base in the U.S. to maintain these cars. And so when they broke, most mechanics, didn't know how to fix them correctly, so they usually couldn't fix the problem, and typically caused other problems when they did try to fix the problem. And so there were always being problems, and of course Citroen does mean lemon. And so the name stuck, and some dealerships, in their advertisements on radio and in early television commercials, said you're not going to get a lemon if you buy, from us, and the connotation continued, and that's pretty much how. There's other folks that say that there's some other influences, but really it was lemon and it was Citroen in America, and the fact is that those cars from that era, as long as you know how to maintain them, they're incredible. There's some of the best cars that were ever built, but it's just Americans couldn't handle them at the time, so that's why they got called lemons. All right, so that was the questions, but we do have some silliness. Now for the silliness today, we're going to take a quiz. I don't know if you've ever watched a channel called Lost in the Pond with Lawrence Brown, but I happen to like that channel. And I thought I would do a quiz here, and this isn't a multiple choice. You either know the answer or you don't. So here's what it's going to be. It's going to be 10 questions, and I'm going to give the British English word for something involving automobiles and driving them and whatnot. And you'll have a few seconds to come up with the American of what it is. Okay, I'll give the British, and then you give the American, and let's see if you can give me your scores, okay, when we're done, okay? So here we go. This is the first quiz on vintage car history. So, question 1. What is a boot? That's boot. All right, and it is the trunk. The trunk of the car, that's the boot. Okay, question number 2. Bonnet. Yes, bonnet. Okay, and a bonnet is the hood. Yep, we got the front and the back already handled. You've probably already aced this so far, so let's go on to the next one. Okay, number 3. lie by. Lie by. And the answer is, it's a rest area. Yes, a rest area. Sometimes, they might call it a rest stop, but rest area. Okay, sorry I'm not giving these British ones with a British accent, so if you're in England, don't get mad at me. Okay, number 4, accumulator. Accumulator. And the answer is, it's the battery. That is the battery on your car, is the accumulator. All right, number 5, verge. V-E-R-G-E, verge. And the verge is the shoulder of a road. Get off on the verge, that's the shoulder of a road. Okay. All right, here we go. Number 6, wing. Like you see on a bird, wing. But on a car, it is the fender. Yes, wing equals fender. Isn't that cool? Okay, number 7, caravan. Caravan. Well, over here in the States, we call those a travel trailer. So, caravan, travel trailer, yep, that's what you got. Okay, y'all should get this one. Lorry. Lorry. And yes, a lorry is a truck. I'm certain y'all got that one. If you didn't, okay, you don't have to admit it. It's okay. Okay, got 2 that should be a little more tough for you. Number 9, cubby hole. Cubby hole. And the cubby hole is the glove box. Yes, that's the glove box in the cubby hole. And the cubby hole's in the glove box. And okay, you got it. Okay, last one. This one should be fun. Pantechnicon. A Pantechnicon. And in the US, we would call that a moving van. Like a house moving van. That's how we would call that. Okay. All right, let me know how you did on the quiz. And so let's move on to a really cool shout out. Now, it's one thing to talk about history, it's another thing to see it. And that's what I love about this channel. Go check it out. It is the 1920s channel. Now, what they do over there is they have photos as well as footage, recitals, etc. from the 1920s, and they present them very, very well. They have several different playlists and series that they're doing, so whether it's on theater, whether it's on poetry, whether it's on houses, whether it's film, whether it's music, they're doing it, and it's really an eye-opener. Anyone who's interested in seeing, just what was going on in the Roaring 20s. So the 1920s channel, trust me, I'll link in the description to them. Like and subscribe. If you like what I do, you're going to love what they do. So that's what we had for today's The Old Garage, and we will see you next time. Peace.